They thought harassing a 91-year-old veteran would be easy until they realized someone far more dangerous was watching. It's a quiet Tuesday afternoon in the small town of Maplewood, where life usually moves at its own unhurried pace. But today, something sinister is brewing on the corner of Main Street. A group of thugs, loud, arrogant, and careless, are circling an elderly man who simply wanted to enjoy his daily walk. Little do they know, their actions are about to set off a chain reaction that will change everything. The old man, Frank Thompson, isn't just any senior citizen. He's a decorated World War II veteran who has seen things these punks couldn't even imagine in their wildest nightmares. At 91 years old, he walks with a slight shuffle now, but there's still fire in his eyes, a quiet strength that tells you he survived worse than this. The thugs sneer as they push him around, mocking his frailty and laughing at his cane like it's some kind of joke. "What are you gonna do, Grandpa? Hit us with your stick." One of them taunts, clearly thinking they've got the upper hand. What they don't realize is that every insult, every shove, is being watched by someone who doesn't take kindly to bullies. Across the street, sitting unnoticed on a park bench, is none other than Clint Eastwood, or at least, someone who looks exactly like him. Dressed in a simple leather jacket and sunglasses, he blends into the background effortlessly. His presence feels almost cinematic, as if he stepped straight out of one of those classic westerns where justice always prevails. You can tell from the way he sits, calm but alert, that he's no ordinary bystander. His sharp gaze locks onto the scene unfolding before him, and though his face remains unreadable, you can feel the tension building. Is he going to intervene? Or is he waiting for something, or someone, to make the first move? As the harassment escalates, Frank stands his ground despite the odds stacked against him. "You boys think you're tough, huh?" he says, his voice steady and laced with defiance. "I've faced men twice your size and 10 times smarter." The thugs pause for a moment, caught off guard by the steel in his tone. But arrogance quickly takes over again, and they laugh harder, shoving him once more. That's when Clint Eastwood rises from the bench. Slowly, deliberately, every movement deliberate, like a lion sizing up its prey. The air shifts instantly. Even the birds seem to stop chirping. Who is this guy? And why does it feel like trouble is about to find the thugs instead of the other way around? But here's the thing. You'll have to wait to find out what happens next. Because sometimes, real heroes don't wear capes or ride horses into the sunset. Sometimes, they sit quietly on park benches, biding their time until the moment is right. Will Clint step in to defend Frank? Or will Frank surprise everyone and handle the situation himself? One thing's for sure. Justice might be slow, but when it arrives, it hits hard. Stay tuned because this story is far from over. Clint Eastwood, or whoever this mysterious figure is, takes a step forward, his boots clicking softly against the pavement. The sound might as well be thunder in the ears of the thugs, who suddenly seem less confident than they did moments ago. One of them glances over their shoulder and freezes when he sees the man approaching. "Who the hell is that?" he mutters under his breath, his bravado cracking like thin ice on a winter lake. The others turn to look, and for the first time, you can see fear flicker across their faces. They don't know him personally, but there's something about the way he carries himself, like danger personified, that makes them second-guess everything. Meanwhile, Frank Thompson stands tall despite the chaos swirling around him. His hands grip his cane tightly, knuckles white with determination. He's not afraid, not of these punks, not of anything. After all, this isn't the first time he's faced down bullies. Back in the war, he fought alongside men who would have given their lives for each other without hesitation. Those memories are etched into his soul, fueling a quiet courage that refuses to back down, even now. But deep down, he wonders why this stranger seems so interested in what's happening. Is he here to help? Or is he just another bystander content to watch the world burn? The tension between the two groups grows thicker by the second. Clint stops a few feet away, his sunglasses reflecting the sunlight like mirrors. He doesn't say a word, not yet, but his presence alone speaks volumes. It's as if he's daring the thugs to make their next move, silently challenging them to cross a line they'll regret forever. For a moment, no one moves. No one breathes. The only sound is the distant hum of traffic and the faint rustling of leaves overhead. Then, one of the thugs breaks the silence. "What are you looking at, old man?" he barks, trying to mask his unease with aggression. "Big mistake." Clint tilts his head slightly, almost imperceptibly, but it's enough to send shivers down everyone's spines. "I'm looking at cowards," he says finally, his voice low and gravelly, dripping with disdain. 4 against 1, and picking on someone who could be your grandfather? Real tough guys, huh? His words hit like punches, knocking the wind out of the thug's bravado. One of them steps forward, puffing out his chest in an attempt to regain control. "You better mind your own business, Pops," he growls, pointing a finger at Clint. "Unless you want to end up on the ground too." Frank chuckles dryly at that, shaking his head. "Kid, if I were you, I'd think twice before threatening someone who looks like they've forgotten more about fighting than you'll ever learn." There's wisdom in his tone, a lifetime of experience wrapped up in those few words. But the thug doesn't listen. He never does. Instead, he lunges toward Clint, fists clenched, ready to throw a punch. That's when things get interesting. Without missing a beat, Clint sidesteps the attack with ease, moving faster than anyone expected. His movements are fluid, calculated, like he's done this 1,000 times before. Maybe he has. The thug stumbles past him, off balance, and before he can recover, Clint grabs his wrist and twists it behind his back. The kid yelps in pain, dropping to his knees. "Still feel tough?" Clint asks coldly, leaning down close enough to whisper. "Or should I teach you how real men handle themselves?" The rest of the gang hesitates, unsure of what to do next. Their leader, the one who started the whole mess, is frozen in place, staring wide-eyed at the scene unfolding before him. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were supposed to intimidate the old man, maybe steal his wallet or knock him around a bit, then walk away laughing. Now, they're trapped in a nightmare they didn't see coming. But just as the situation seems to be tipping in Frank and Clint's favor, a car screeches to a halt nearby. Doors slam shut, and 3 more figures emerge. Bigger, meaner, angrier. Reinforcements? Or trouble doubling down? One of them shouts, "What's going on here?" And the thugs visibly relax, emboldened by the arrival of backup. Frank's jaw tightens, and Clint's expression remains unreadable, but you can tell the stakes have just been raised. Who are these new players, and what role will they play in this showdown? As the crowd grows larger, whispers ripple through the air. People passing by stop to watch, phones already recording the confrontation. Word spreads quickly in a small town like Maplewood. By tomorrow morning, this incident will be the talk of the entire community. But right now, all eyes are glued to the drama playing out in real time. Will Clint and Frank stand their ground against overwhelming odds? Or will the thugs and their reinforcements prove too much to handle? You'll have to keep watching to find out. Because sometimes, heroes aren't defined by the battles they win, but by the ones they refuse to lose. The new arrivals swagger toward the scene, their heavy boots thudding against the pavement like a countdown to something inevitable. They're bigger, yes, but it's not just their size that makes them intimidating. It's the cold, predatory look in their eyes. These aren't kids looking for trouble. These are men who thrive on it. One of them cracks his knuckles loudly, almost theatrically, as if trying to remind everyone he's here to make an impact. "You picked the wrong day to mess with us," he growls, glaring at Clint and Frank. His voice carries authority, the kind born from years of throwing his weight around without consequence. Clint doesn't flinch. He still has the first thug pinned down, wrist twisted painfully behind his back, but his focus shifts seamlessly to the newcomers. There's no panic in his stance, just calm calculation, like a chess player planning 3 moves ahead. "Funny," Clint mutters, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I was about to say the same thing to you." The crowd watching from a distance murmurs nervously, unsure whether to cheer or run for cover. This isn't just a scuffle anymore. It's a powder keg waiting to explode. Frank, meanwhile, takes a small step forward, planting his cane firmly on the ground. Despite his age, there's something commanding about him, a quiet dignity that demands respect even now. "Listen up, boys," he says, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "You came here thinking you could push people around because they're weaker than you. But let me tell you something. You don't scare me. And neither do your friends." His words hang in the air like a challenge, daring anyone to test him further. One of the reinforcements, a burly man with tattoos snaking up his arms, sneers at Frank. "Old man, you've got guts talking like that. But guts won't save you when we're done with you." He glances at Clint, then back at Frank, clearly sizing them both up. And whoever this guy is, he ain't walking away either. It's clear they're not backing down. Not yet. But what they don't realize is that every threat they throw out only deepens the resolve of the 2 men standing against them. As the tension builds, subtle subplots begin to emerge. A young woman in the crowd whispers urgently into her phone, likely calling the police. Nearby, a teenage boy films the entire confrontation with shaky hands, torn between fascination and fear. "This is insane," he mutters to his friend beside him. "Do you think someone's gonna get hurt?" His friend shrugs, wide-eyed. "Probably. But can you imagine how many views this'll get online?" Their conversation highlights the duality of human nature, the instinct to help versus the urge to spectate. Meanwhile, an elderly couple watches from across the street, holding hands tightly. "It's always the good ones who stand up," the woman murmurs softly, "even when it costs them." Back at the center of the storm, Clint finally releases the thug he's been restraining, shoving him roughly toward his friends. The kid stumbles backward, clutching his sore wrist, humiliation burning in his cheeks. "Go ahead," Clint says, his voice low but carrying enough menace to silence the entire block. "Try again. See where it gets you." The leader of the reinforcements narrows his eyes, clearly debating whether to charge forward or wait for the right moment. For now, he opts for the latter, circling slowly like a predator testing its prey. But the real wild card in all of this is Frank himself. While Clint exudes an aura of controlled danger, Frank radiates resilience, a reminder that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about standing firm even when you're terrified. As the standoff continues, flashes of his past start to surface in his mind. He remembers the battles fought overseas, the camaraderie of soldiers willing to die for each other, and the promise they made to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Is that why he refuses to back down today? Or is it something simpler, a refusal to let bullies win, no matter the cost? Just as things seem ready to boil over, another twist emerges. A sleek black car pulls up silently at the edge of the scene, its tinted windows hiding whoever sits inside. The driver steps out, a sharply dressed man with a clipboard and an earpiece. "Gentlemen," he announces, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "There's been a misunderstanding here. Let's take a step back." His presence throws everyone off balance. Who is he? A mediator? A threat? Or someone worse? Before anyone can react, the man gestures subtly to one of the thugs, who nods and starts whispering frantically to the others. Whatever message he's delivering seems urgent, because their body language shifts instantly. They go from aggressive to cautious in seconds. What do they know that the rest of us don't? And how does this stranger fit into the equation? The clock ticks louder in everyone's minds. The crowd holds its collective breath. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Clint and Frank exchange a glance, a silent agreement that whatever happens next, they'll face it together. But the question remains, will they walk away unscathed? Or is this just the beginning of something far darker? You'll have to stay tuned to find out. The sharply dressed man with the clipboard takes another step forward, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement like a metronome counting down to chaos. His calm demeanor contrasts sharply with the storm brewing around him, but there's something unsettling about the way he carries himself, like a puppet master pulling invisible strings. "Let's not make this any messier than it already is," he says smoothly, his tone measured and deliberate. But his words don't soothe anyone. If anything, they heighten the unease in the air. What does he mean by messy? And why does he seem so confident that he can control the situation? Clint narrows his eyes behind his sunglasses, studying the newcomer with the kind of intensity usually reserved for predators sizing up their prey. He doesn't trust this guy. Not one bit. There's no warmth in his voice, no genuine concern for the escalating conflict. Instead, there's an icy precision, as though every word has been carefully rehearsed. "Who are you?" Clint asks bluntly, cutting through the tension like a blade. The question hangs there, sharp and unyielding, demanding an answer. For a moment, the man hesitates, glancing briefly at the thugs before turning back to Clint. "Someone who'd prefer this didn't escalate further," he replies cryptically, his lips curling into a faint smirk. It's not much of an answer, but it's enough to confirm what Clint already suspects. This isn't just some random passerby trying to play peacemaker. Meanwhile, Frank grips his cane tighter, his knuckles white with determination. He's seen men like this before. Men who think they're untouchable because they wear expensive suits and carry themselves like kings. Back in the war, they were called officers who gave orders from safe distances while others bled for them. Frank knows better than to let appearances fool him now. "You here to help or hinder?" he demands gruffly, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. The suited man tilts his head slightly, considering the question. "That depends on how cooperative everyone decides to be," he says coolly, his gaze flickering between Clint, Frank, and the gang of thugs. His ambiguity only fuels the growing suspicion that he's not here to defuse the situation. He's here to manipulate it. The leader of the reinforcements shifts uncomfortably under the weight of the stranger's stare. Whatever connection exists between them, it's clear he's not entirely comfortable taking orders in front of an audience. Still, he straightens his posture and addresses his crew with forced bravado. "All right, listen up. We're handling this our way," he barks, though his voice lacks its earlier conviction. One of his buddies mutters something under his breath, too low for anyone else to hear, but the hesitation is obvious. They may have numbers on their side, but confidence is crumbling fast. As the standoff intensifies, small details start to emerge that hint at larger forces at play. The teenage boy filming the scene zooms in on the license plate of the black car, curiosity getting the better of him. A woman in the crowd whispers urgently to her husband, "Doesn't that guy look familiar? I swear I've seen him somewhere." Meanwhile, the elderly couple across the street exchange worried glances, sensing that this confrontation has implications far beyond a simple street fight. Even the young woman on the phone pauses mid-sentence, lowering her voice as she describes the new arrival to whoever's on the other end. Something about him feels wrong. Back at the heart of the drama, Clint steps closer to the suited man, closing the gap between them with slow, deliberate movements. "Here's how this works," Clint growls, his voice low and dangerous. "You tell me exactly who you are and why you're really here, or we settle this right now." His hand twitches slightly toward the inside of his jacket, where something metallic gleams faintly beneath the fabric. Is it a weapon, or just a bluff? Either way, the threat is unmistakable. The suited man raises an eyebrow, unfazed by the display of aggression. "Careful, Mr. Eastwood," he says casually, as if addressing an old acquaintance. "Some battles aren't worth fighting." The mention of Clint's name sends a ripple through the crowd. Gasps erupt, followed by hushed whispers. "Wait, is that the Clint Eastwood?" someone exclaims, disbelief coloring their tone. Suddenly, the stakes feel even higher. If this mysterious figure knows Clint personally, or professionally, it means this isn't just a chance encounter. This was planned, orchestrated. But by whom, and for what purpose? Frank senses the shift in dynamics and moves closer to Clint, standing shoulder to shoulder with him. Despite their age difference, they share a bond forged in seconds, a mutual understanding that they're facing something bigger than either of them expected. "Whatever game you're playing," Frank says firmly, addressing the suited man, "we're not pawns. So cut the act and tell us what you want." His words hang heavy in the air, daring the stranger to reveal his true intentions. But instead of answering, the suited man gestures subtly to the thugs, who immediately form a loose circle around Clint and Frank. Their body language screams hostility, but there's also uncertainty in their eyes. Are they being used as pawns too? Before anyone can react, the suited man turns back to his car, opening the door halfway. "Make your choice wisely," he says over his shoulder, his tone dripping with finality. Then, without another word, he slips inside and slams the door shut. The engine roars to life, and the car speeds off, leaving everyone stunned. Now it's just Clint, Frank, and the gang, and the clock ticking toward an inevitable explosion. The thugs exchange uneasy glances, clearly torn between following orders and backing down. One of them cracks his knuckles again, louder this time, as if trying to summon courage. "Looks like it's just us now," he sneers, though his voice wavers slightly. Clint smirks, his expression unreadable. "Guess we'll see who walks away from this." And then, silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Every eye is locked on the two sides, waiting for the first move. The tension is unbearable, like a rubber band stretched to its breaking point. You can almost hear the snap coming, but when will it happen? And who will strike first? Just as the tension reaches its breaking point, a sharp whistle cuts through the air like a knife. Everyone freezes. Clint, Frank, the thugs, even the crowd holding their breath. Heads snap toward the source of the sound, and there, standing at the edge of the chaos, is a figure no one expected to see. It's a woman, tall and commanding, with fiery red hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She's dressed in tactical gear, her boots scuffed but sturdy, and she holds a police baton loosely in one hand. Her badge glints in the sunlight as she steps forward, her presence immediately shifting the dynamic. "All right, that's enough," she barks, her voice cutting through the silence like thunder. "Everyone on the ground, now." The thugs exchange panicked looks, clearly unsure how to react. They've gone from feeling untouchable to being cornered in a matter of minutes, and this latest development throws them completely off balance. One of them mutters under his breath, "Cops? Seriously?" But the woman doesn't give them time to process. She strides into the center of the scene, her movements deliberate and authoritative. "I said down," she repeats, her tone leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, the gang begins to comply, dropping to their knees with muttered curses and defeated expressions. But just when it seems like the situation might finally be under control, The officer's attention shifts to Clint and Frank. Her expression hardens as she studies them, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And you too," she says sharply, pointing her baton at them. "Don't think I don't know who you are, or what you're capable of." Her words catch everyone off guard, especially Clint, whose jaw tightens imperceptibly. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asks, his voice calm but laced with suspicion. The officer smirks, clearly enjoying the moment. "Let's just say your reputation precedes you, Mr. Eastwood. And you," she turns to Frank, her gaze softening ever so slightly. "You've got quite the file yourself, soldier." Frank stiffens, gripping his cane tighter. "What file?" he demands, his voice edged with confusion and anger. "I haven't done anything wrong." The officer raises an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Not today, maybe. But we both know that's not the whole story, is it?" Her cryptic response sends a chill through the crowd. What does she mean by file? Is she talking about something in Frank's past, or something more recent? Before either man can respond, the officer gestures to two patrol cars pulling up behind her, their sirens wailing loudly. Uniformed officers spill out, quickly taking charge of the scene. Handcuffs click into place as the thugs are hauled to their feet, protesting loudly. But the surprises don't stop there. As the officers begin sorting through the mess, another car arrives, a sleek SUV this time, its windows tinted and its engine purring softly. The door opens, and out steps none other than the suited man from earlier, his clipboard still tucked under his arm. He exchanges a quick nod with the red-haired officer, their silent communication speaking volumes. Whatever connection exists between them, it's clear they're working together. But to what end? Clint watches the exchange carefully, his mind racing. This isn't just a random intervention. It's coordinated, planned. And suddenly, pieces start falling into place. The thugs weren't acting alone. They were pawns in a much larger game. But whose game? And why involve Clint and Frank? Before he can piece it all together, the suited man approaches again, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. "Well, well," he says smoothly, addressing Clint and Frank. "Looks like things have gotten complicated." His smirk is infuriating, his confidence unwavering. "But don't worry. We'll sort this out soon enough." Frank steps forward, his patience wearing thin. "Enough games," he snaps, his voice rising with frustration. "Who are you people, and what do you want from us?" The suited man chuckles softly, clearly amused by the question. "Let's just say we represent interests higher than your pay grade, Mr. Thompson. Interests that require certain skills." His words hang in the air, heavy with implication. Skills? What skills could they possibly need from a 91-year-old veteran and a man who looks like he stepped out of a classic western? Before either Clint or Frank can press further, the red-haired officer interrupts, her tone clipped and professional. "That's enough talk," she says firmly, stepping between them. "You two are coming with me, for questioning." Questioning? About what? Neither man has broken any laws, at least, not today. Yet the way she says it suggests there's more going on than meets the eye. The crowd murmurs nervously, sensing that this confrontation is far from over. As Clint and Frank are escorted toward the waiting vehicles, the suited man leans in close, his voice low but carrying enough menace to send shivers down their spines. "Cooperate, and you might just walk away from this. Resist." He lets the threat hang unfinished, his meaning crystal clear. Then, with a final glance at the chaos he's orchestrated, he climbs back into his SUV and drives off, leaving Clint and Frank to face whatever comes next. The stakes have never been higher, with law enforcement involved, and shadowy figures pulling strings from behind the scenes. The line between ally and enemy blurs dangerously. Are Clint and Frank prisoners, pawns, or players in a game they don't yet understand? One thing is certain. The answers lie ahead, and the journey to find them will test every ounce of courage and cunning they possess. But will they survive long enough to uncover the truth? You'll have to keep watching to find out. The interrogation room is cold and sterile, the kind of place designed to make you feel small. Clint sits across from Frank at a battered metal table, their expressions unreadable but their minds racing. Outside, the red-haired officer paces back and forth, her boots echoing ominously against the tiled floor. She's clearly in charge here, but there's something about her demeanor, something restless, that suggests she's not entirely comfortable with whatever's unfolding. Through the one-way mirror, shadowy figures watch silently, their faces obscured. It's clear this isn't just routine questioning, it's something far more calculated. "All right," the officer says finally, stepping into the room and slamming a folder onto the table. Her sharp green eyes dart between Clint and Frank as she takes a seat opposite them. "Let's cut to the chase. You two are either incredibly stupid or incredibly brave. Which is it?" Her tone is biting, but there's an undercurrent of curiosity beneath the hostility. Clint leans back in his chair, crossing his arms casually. "Depends on who's asking," he replies coolly, his voice dripping with defiance. Frank, meanwhile, grips the edge of the table tightly, his knuckles white. "We didn't do anything wrong," he insists firmly. "So why don't you tell us what's really going on?" The officer smirks, tapping the folder with her pen. "Oh, I think you know exactly what's going on. Or at least, parts of it." She flips open the folder, revealing grainy photos of Clint and Frank, some recent, others decades old. There's even a faded newspaper clipping of Frank in uniform, standing alongside fellow soldiers during the war. "You've both been involved in situations before," she says cryptically, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. "Situations that caught the attention of certain people. People who want answers." Clint narrows his eyes behind his sunglasses, leaning forward slightly. "What kind of people?" he asks, his voice low and dangerous. The officer hesitates for a moment, then sighs deeply, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Let's just say they're not fans of loose ends," she says finally, her gaze locking onto Clint's. "And right now, you two are looking like very big loose ends." Before either man can respond, the door bursts open, and a familiar figure steps inside, the suited man from earlier. His presence instantly shifts the energy in the room, his calm confidence clashing with the tension radiating off everyone else. "Enough games," he says sharply, addressing the officer. "We don't have time for this." He turns to Clint and Frank, his expression unreadable. "Here's the deal. We need your help. Not because we want it, but because we don't have a choice." Frank scoffs, shaking his head in disbelief. "Help? With what? You've got some nerve showing up here after everything." The suited man ignores the outburst, pulling out a tablet and sliding it across the table. On the screen is a map marked with several locations, each labeled with ominous codes. "These are targets," he explains bluntly. "High-value ones. And someone's planning to hit them within the next 24 hours. We intercepted intel suggesting you two might be connected to the operation, or at least, someone thinks you are." Clint studies the map carefully, his mind working overtime. "Why us?" he asks finally, his voice steady despite the weight of the revelation. The suited man shrugs. "Could be coincidence. Could be a setup. Either way, you're in the crosshairs now. So here's the offer. Work with us, stop the attack, and walk away clean. Refuse." He lets the sentence trail off, his meaning crystal clear. For a moment, silence fills the room as Clint and Frank exchange a glance. They've faced danger before, but this feels different, bigger. Finally, Frank speaks up, his voice firm despite the uncertainty swirling around them. If we do this, we do it our way. No strings attached. The suited man nods reluctantly. Fair enough. But remember, one misstep, and you're on your own. With that, the plan kicks into motion. Armed with limited resources and even less trust, Clint and Frank find themselves thrust into a high-stakes mission unlike anything they've ever faced. Using their combined experience and instincts, they track down leads, confront unexpected allies and enemies, and piece together fragments of a conspiracy that runs deeper than they imagined. Along the way, they uncover shocking truths about the thugs, the suited man, and even the red-haired officer herself. Each revelation brings them closer to stopping the impending disaster, but also closer to danger. Just when it seems like they've cracked the case, a final twist throws everything into chaos. As they prepare to neutralize the last target, Clint notices something odd, a reflection in a window that shouldn't be there. Turning slowly, he locks eyes with none other than the suited man, standing in the shadows with a gun pointed directly at them. "Sorry, gentlemen," he says softly, his tone devoid of emotion. Orders change. Before he can pull the trigger, however, Frank lunges forward, using his cane to knock the weapon aside. Chaos erupts as gunfire echoes through the night, leaving viewers breathless. In the aftermath, the dust settles, but questions remain. Did they truly stop the attack? Who gave the orders to betray them? And most importantly, what happens next? As Clint and Frank disappear into the darkness, their fates uncertain, one thing becomes clear. This battle may be over, but the war has only just begun. The night air is thick with the smell of gunpowder and adrenaline as Clint and Frank stand amidst the wreckage, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The suited man lies motionless on the ground, his betrayal cut short by Frank's quick thinking and Clint's unshakable reflexes. Around them, the remnants of the operation are scattered, abandoned weapons, torn maps, and a radio crackling with static. It's over. Or at least, it seems that way. But neither man feels victorious. Instead, they're left with more questions than answers, the weight of what just happened pressing down on them like an invisible force. Frank leans heavily on his cane, his body trembling not from exhaustion but from the sheer magnitude of everything they've uncovered. "What now?" he asks quietly, his voice barely audible over the distant hum of sirens approaching in the background. Clint doesn't answer right away. He kneels beside the suited man's lifeless form, searching for anything that might explain who sent him or why. All he finds is a crumpled piece of paper in the man's pocket, a list of names, including their own. At the top of the page, scrawled in bold letters, are the words, Phase 2. Clint exhales sharply, shoving the paper into his jacket without a word. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about stopping an attack. This was bigger, much bigger, and if Phase 2 exists, then someone out there still has plans for them. Frank notices the grim look on Clint's face and steps closer, his eyes narrowing. "What is it?" he demands, his tone sharper than before. When Clint hands him the paper, Frank's expression darkens. "This isn't over," he mutters, shaking his head. "They'll come after us again." Before either of them can say more, headlights pierce through the darkness as vehicles roll up. Police cars, ambulances, and even a black SUV identical to the one the suited man arrived in earlier. Officers spill out, guns drawn, shouting orders that echo through the empty streets. Among them is the red-haired officer, her face pale and strained. She looks torn between relief and regret, her usual confidence replaced by something fragile. As she approaches Clint and Frank, her steps falter slightly, as if she's unsure how to proceed. "You two. You shouldn't be here," she says finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not anymore." "What do you mean?" Clint asks, his tone icy. You dragged us into this mess. Now you owe us some answers. The officer hesitates, glancing nervously at the growing crowd of law enforcement personnel surrounding them. Finally, she motions for them to follow her to a quieter spot, away from prying ears. Once they're alone, she takes a deep breath, steeling herself. This wasn't supposed to happen, she admits, her voice trembling. We were told you'd cooperate willingly, that you'd understand the stakes. But things escalated faster than anyone expected. Frank cuts her off, his patience wearing thin. Understand what? Who exactly are we? And why does everyone keep acting like we're part of some secret club we never signed up for? The officer flinches at his outburst but doesn't back down. It's complicated, she says softly. But the truth is, you're not ordinary people. Neither of you. You've done things, seen things, that make you valuable. Dangerous. Even. To the wrong people. Her words hang in the air, heavy with implication. Clint and Frank exchange a glance, silently acknowledging the truth behind her statement. They may not have asked for this, but they can't deny the reality staring them in the face. Their pasts, the battles fought, the sacrifices made, have shaped them into men capable of handling situations most wouldn't survive. And now, those same qualities have made them targets. As dawn breaks over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clint and Frank find themselves standing at a crossroads. The immediate threat has been neutralized, but the larger conspiracy looms ominously in the distance. We could walk away, Frank suggests, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer. Clint shakes his head, a faint smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. And let whoever's pulling these strings win? Not a chance. With that, they make their decision, not because they have to, but because they choose to. Together, they disappear into the rising sun, leaving behind the chaos and uncertainty. They don't know what lies ahead, but one thing is certain. They'll face it together. Because sometimes, courage isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about refusing to back down when the odds are stacked against you. For the audience watching, the story ends not with closure, but with reflection. What defines a hero? Is it strength, skill, or simply the willingness to stand up when others won't? As the screen fades to black, the final message lingers. Heroes aren't born, they're made. And sometimes, they're found where you least expect them.